The last name comes from my buddy Abe Sutherland, who was like a State Department guy, went to Afghanistan, and just has a great name and was a great guy. And then the inspiration for the book was really a friend of mine who worked a night watch at the FBI, and we were in our 20s, and basically this guy would just like disappear every night, and I knew he worked for the FBI, and he'd be at a party and then he'd go to work. Wow, that's the coolest thing on earth. What's he doing? Is he killing people? Like what's his deal? We sort of fell out of touch, and then we got back in touch, and he's a good friend now. But he the whole story is what I imagined his job was. And I later talked to him about his job, and it was actually even cooler than I thought it was. But that the idea of a young person who in the book is in the Situation Room in the White House, because you can have a relatively junior person who suddenly is the president's point person on a like unfolding global crisis. Like this happened with like LBJ or someone, where you'd have him come down and just be like, what's going on with this unfolding international catastrophe? And that young person is suddenly like the fulcrum of the whole government. So it's perfect for a thriller. And then the idea is he, sits behind this phone that never rings. And one night it rings and it's the last thing he expects. And he's plunged into a conspiracy. So that's the setup. Character wise, they did this in the show, but I went farther in the book, where he's a super rule follower at the beginning because his dad was suspected of being a spy. And this is kind of like how I like to take people all the way through their story arc. That could probably only happen once in their life. And then he has to become like a total outlaw rule breaker and potentially like his father. So it was fun to kind of take him on that journey. And they did use it in the show, but maybe not to the same degree. Having been in DC for a while, I got to know some like CIA and FBI people. And it's like DC, it's so funny that, my friend who was like a DJ at our wedding, he ultimately was like, hey, you should talk to my dad. And this guy was like, I met him in group house, and we'd have these like great house parties, and he's like the best DJ in the world. And then, his dad gave me access to like these FBI, CIA people. And one of them actually was in leadership at the FBI when the Hansen stuff happened. So I got to talk to him about all this mole hunt stuff and like how the legacy sticks with people, and like how trying it is in an organization. So it was just a really cool thing to get a feel for the real texture of that. And then, spending that much time in DC, you can really think about these people as like fathers and sons and all of that. So that went into it. And as far as rabbit holes, I mean, that's all I do. Like, I was like, he picks up the phone and he's plunged into a conspiracy, and everybody said, great, go write it. And then I sit down and I have a year, just a blank year to write this thing. And I'm like, well, who's on the phone? What the hell happens? And I basically just take like really long walks and let it fill in, and then write some down, and then let more fill in. And yeah, it's wild. But there's always a moment in each book where you think the whole thing's going to collapse on itself. This will be kind of spoilery, so just like, earmuffs if you really want to come into it fresh. But I was watching a movie, and they had this like incredibly maternal actress as like a CIA handler, and then they had this super gruff, maybe English. He couldn't have been English. This gruff, big, huge, scary guy, character actor, as the CIA like boss. And I said, "Oh, I write books. They're gonna make that sweet, huggable maternal lady the mole." And then I was watching it, and then they made the big, gruff, cynical guy the mole, and I was like, that was so obvious. If you made the woman the mole, that would have been incredible. And so, I had overthought this movie, and then I said, oh, I'll go do that in my book. And it was really fun to deploy. And then that book I started writing it really early. There were political parallels to real life, but then they became like headline news. And when they became headline news, suddenly the book that was basically, I was like a third half done, I was like, oh, this book is going to look like it's chasing the news. I am screwed. What the heck am I going to do? And freaking. And and then but it forced me to come up with like a final twist, which is totally different than the show. Um, and worked out, and I think added a twist and made it less predictable and a little less like mapped onto current politics, which is nice because you don't want people you want people to be able to escape into it. Inside Thread is the book. I'm shamelessly plugging it over here, and the setup. It's another one of these ideas I've had in my file for forever, but it's what if the president is under threat and they take him to one of these big continuity of government like doomsday bunkers, and they lock him in, and then he's locked in with all these people he should be able to trust, and he finds out he's locked in with the threat. And so it's like Die Hard at a place called Raven Rock, which is a real continuity of government bunker. It's near Camp David. And when you hear that like Vice President Cheney is at an undisclosed location, there's a good chance he's at Raven Rock or its sister site, which is out near like Paris, Virginia. Because it's under a mountain, like a Bond villain lair, and it's the size of a small city. It has more office space than the Pentagon. And so I said, this is great. And I thought, oh, I'll write this book. They're all locked in this one place. It'll be so easy. And it was so hard to write because you're constrained, and then the setting is really like it's alien to people because they basically carve these giant tunnels through a mountain and then build office buildings inside them. So it's like writing like a space sci-fi thing in terms of orienting people. And yeah, it's still playing on this kind of paranoid vibe. The 70s thrillers are a big touchstone for me. And like, so it's a little bit like we're 60s and 70s. So it's a little bit like 7 Days in May meets kind of Die Hard. And then, for this one, I started with the story and then the characters came in. And there's a nice moment where the characters flesh themselves out and then become walking, talking, full human beings and start surprising you. So there's the main character is a Secret Service agent, and then a kind of rookie Secret Service agent. And the main guy, Eric Hill, his partner was killed, and he has guilt about that. And then his partner's daughter, it's her first day on the White House detail, and they get pulled into this thing. There's a second season of Night Agent, which I'm incredibly excited about. And then the next book is really early, but the idea is you have an actress who ends up playing like a lot of badass characters, and then her friend disappears, and she has to try to track down the friend. But in real life, she's not badass, and so she has to sort of like become the character she's played. So it's a little bit like Taken, but you have a woman looking for a friend, and then she gets drawn into all this kind of espionage stuff. So that's very early. I don't even know if I should be talking about it, but that's what I'm like grinding away every day on.